So good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Women in History Month celebration, Women in Leadership panel. We have this afternoon some of our very own LFCC leaders. President of Lord Fairfax Community College, Dr. Kim Blosser, VP of Workforce Solutions and Continuing Education, Mrs. Jeanine Clark, VP of Academic and Student Affairs, Dr. Ann Davis, Dean of Enrollment Services, and Title IX Coordinator, Dr. Mia DeZura, VP of Human Resources, Mrs. Joanne Elwood, Dean of Students, Mrs. Amber Foltz, and last but certainly not least, Associate VP of Student Services and Academic Support, Dr. Caroline Wood.
Y'all always give me a doctorate and I don't have it yet. I'm still like weeks away. It's still just a minute.
Close.
I do apologize, but
Close.
We're just talking it in the making.
That's right.
Our moderator this afternoon is LFCC student Martha Cassiano. Martha is a health science student. She plans to transfer in the year of 2022. Martha dreams to become a doctor. She's a member of the PTK Honor Society, STEM Club, and the Student Government Association. Martha will be asking the panelists some questions. We'll open the floor up to the audience, and then we will close out the afternoon. Okay, go ahead, Martha.
Thank you for that introduction and welcome everyone. The first thing on our agenda is I would like to say thank you for coming to our Women's Leadership at LFCC. And the first thing I want to ask all you lovely ladies in the audience, the main panelists, I would like to ask first, I'm sorry. What exactly is a typical day for you at LFCC? Anyone can jump in if they want to go first.
I'll jump in. I don't think there's such a thing as a typical day at LFCC, so I'll start with that. But I think that's one of the things that I really like about my role is that there is no typical day. Every day is a mixture of meetings, policy and procedure discussions. Actually, I'm fortunate that I still get to work directly with some of our students. So sometimes it's offering support to a student or guidance to a student. Other times it's advocating on behalf of our students to make sure that we don't end up with policies or procedures that aren't student friendly or aren't student centered. So every day looks a little bit different, and it's often a blend of sprinting and putting out fires and celebrating. So I think that's one of the best mixes I could offer.
Would Dr. Blosser would like to be second?
Well, yeah, and mine's probably a little bit different than some, although it just depends. But I would say yes, every day is different. The only thing that's different about mine is that I spend probably pre-pandemic, in a year's time, you spend probably about half of your time off campus or meeting with external folks or meeting with donors or that kind of thing. So that's a little different maybe than previous roles that I've had at the college. But it's one of those things that's important is that you're meeting with your industry partners and some of those folks. So I think that's probably just one thing that's different than what Amber said. Thankfully, I do get to meet with students some. And even now, actually, I meet with students more when they're happy. When I was a dean and a VP, sometimes you meet with them when they're not so happy. But now I get to meet with SGA and with students for other reasons. And so I get the best part of hanging out with students.
I'll jump in. And I actually changed roles, and it's interesting. I've seen a difference in my days and who I spend time with. And I'm not sure yet if I'm quite happy about it. So I used to be a dean last year, and I would say that 75% of my time was spent with students and faculty, and then the 25% in meetings, maybe 30%. Whereas now I find that I'm less with students and more with both faculty and administrators and in meetings. And I do have to say that I miss the student interaction. So what I don't know is if that's the pandemic or not, but I think that I speak for all of us when I say that it's like give us the energy and get us excited about what we do in a day. I used to be the dean at the Fauquier campus, and I would love going to student life events and meeting with students and enjoying what they're enjoying and hearing about how they're doing. So I'm hoping when we get back on campus, we'll see more of that.
Would Dr. Davis would like to go third?
Certainly, I think that as my colleagues have said, there's a lot of variety in the day in terms of the things you might be dealing with. But thinking about from a leadership perspective and from that lens, as you know, as you move up into positions at an institution, to Caroline's point, you're often more removed from students, which is usually the reason you started in higher education and the energy that you get. And the lens that I've always taken is that when I was a classroom instructor, which I absolutely loved, I taught biology for years, I was influencing those students that were in the class with me. But I realized that if I wanted to have a broader impact on the institution and to impact students more than the 24 that I might be teaching in a section of my class, then I would need to move up into leadership positions within the college where I could have an impact on trying to, affect the mission and vision of the college through the work that you do with the people that work at the college. And you can end up having a broader impact. You might not always be directly the person making that impact on the student. And so that's what's continued to give me, I guess, energy and keep me engaged in the position, is that the influence that I can have to help meet the president's vision for the college, to help meet our mission as an institution, is to work with those folks under me who then work with faculty and students. So you just have to take a different lens on it as you move up into positions at the college.
Ms. Elwood, would you like to introduce yourself and what your role is at Lfcc?
Absolutely, thank you. Yes, I'm Joanne, and I am responsible for human resources at the college. So my perspective may be a little bit different in that much of my focus is on our wonderful faculty and staff and ensuring that they have everything they need to support our students. And so, like some have shared, this year has been a little unique, definitely different than in years past. I can say that my typical day is really around staying on top of all of the changing dynamics within workforce today that is changing on a regular basis, and making sure that we are providing the most up-to-date information that we can to ensure that our faculty and staff have the programs they need, the benefits they need. It is just, I've been in human resources now for, I guess, about 15 years, and I've never seen it quite at this pace before. But it's one of the things I love, because we often talk about how we love that no day is the same. There is no typical day. And this year has certainly not been an exception to that. And so while at times exhausting, it is incredibly rewarding too, because what we do matters at the college. And so it's been a challenging year, but also an incredibly rewarding year in that aspect.
Ms. Clark, I don't think I've ever had the pleasure of meeting you. Would you introduce yourself and the role that you play at LCC?
Sure. Thanks, Martha. My name is Jeannie Ann Clark. I'm the Vice President of Workforce. And my day is a lot probably closest to Kim's day. I'm as much outside of the institution as I am inside the institution with Workforce. So when you asked that question, I just literally looked at today. What's on the calendar is a great representation. So far today, I've been 4 hours with employers. Started out the day meeting with a pharmaceutical company that's looking to relocate, well, expand operations into Warren County. They're currently in Texas and Florida. And then 3 hours of the day working on a strategic planning session with a group of employers that sit on our workforce development board. So 4 hours of the day externally today, an hour and a half in VCCS meetings today, 2 different meetings. So that's pretty typical, about 50-50 with that mix. The thing that maybe the different lens or perspective that I could add, because we are having a conversation about women and leadership, to the lens of a typical day is, if any of you know your MBTI type, I'm an ESTJ, which means I'm very goal-oriented, task-oriented. But as a leader, that's a good thing, but it's not necessarily a good thing, because you're only as successful as a leader in how empowered your team is and how clear the vision is for them to execute their mission and to support that vision. And so I have about a 45-minute hour drive into campus, back again. So I podcast a ton. And on my way into work, I'm always looking for that nugget of inspiration I always look to reinvest that somewhere in the folks I get to work with. So I make that a challenge every day, in listening to those podcasts, what nugget that is that takes me off of being sometimes myopically focused on goals and execution and those types of things, but really, most importantly, to be able to invest that time back into the team that makes the institution successful. And that brings joy. That brings a lot of joy and meaning to being a leader and seeing that seed take off.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Desiree, would you like to introduce yourself in the role of LFCC?
Sure. I'm the Dean of Enrollment Services and Title IX Coordinator. And so I am the opposite of Jeannie Ann in breakdown, except I am an IE depending upon when I test. So we would be exact opposite personalities to some degree, even though I'm more introverted, which is kind of interesting. My days are very different. Mine probably look the most like Amber's of anybody's here. Amber has probably more student interaction than I do. And so mine's a lot more email based at this point than having long conversations. This past week, I've been in 4 hours of training with lawyers about Title IX, which I felt like going back to graduate school, which was very interesting, but they're all out of the SUNY system. And I felt probably like a student and very anxious. And I was like, they are so much smarter than me. And I couldn't keep up with the listening. I was trying to listen quickly. And so every day is different. I think probably though, the most like probably Amber's, and I have a lot of meetings. It's been interesting working from home. My husband's working from home during this as well. And he says, all you do is meet all the day. And you look at the people you work with all the day. In his company, they meet, but they never get on where they see each other. And he said, why as educators do you have to see each other to have your meetings? I don't understand this. Why do you have to look at each other? I said, it's how we connect, I guess. But I think mine is a lot of meetings, a lot of emails. I just sent an email off while doing this. We have a student who's applying to at least 6 colleges, one of our great students we have, but due to financial hardship, we need to try to work with some transcript requests. So there's a lot of stuff like Amber was talking about with barriers to students and how we can still help and support them. And then whatever Caroline says do is just what we do. I mean, we're just whatever she says she needs, we just try to help and support so we can best serve students. So Caroline somewhat sets that structure for me, which is really nice, I would say.
Thank you. From what everyone's been telling me, it seems like everyone's a gear in the machine of LFCC and just keeping it running. And thank you for doing that. So we're going to go on a list of questions for y'all. And the one that we have right now is, what are some of the challenges you have faced on your path to leadership? And what did you do to overcome those challenges? Would Miss Amber Foltz would like to go in?
Yeah, I would say probably thus far in my career, one of the biggest challenges for me was in that time period where I shifted from being a colleague to a supervisor of people that I had previously been, at the same level and coworkers with. And trying to navigate that period of establishing new boundaries and making your expectations clear, and honestly dealing with some feelings of loss and grief in that I lost friendships in that period because the power dynamic changed. That was a really hard period for me. Actually, I'll give a plug to our colleagues in workforce. That first year, I attended a training that was called something like from coworker.
Buddy to boss.
Yes.
Buddy to boss.
Buddy to boss. I did that, and I talked a lot with other leaders who had come before me and who'd made that transition about how to work through those feelings. Another piece of it that I have really, and I can kind of empathize with what Caroline had shared about less interaction with students. I went from being a person who was an academic advisor who spent, 80% of my time every day working with students, to having to learn new expectations and having to learn how to lead without getting all of the good feelings that came from working with students and directly making a difference in their lives. And I was fortunate to have a supervisor at that time who was another woman leader who helped me to embrace the fact that I was moving in my career from helping to grow students to helping to grow employees, and how to reframe that I still could have passion in a mission, a personal mission that maybe looked a little bit different for me. So I would say those were two of my biggest learning challenges, at least in that transitional time at the beginning of my leadership.
Thank you for sharing that. It seems like you've overcome quite a bit, and seeing you where you at, I just appreciate you even more. um, would Miss Caroline would like to talk about how she overcame um any hardships and how?
Sure. I would say, I think if there was a theme of barriers for me, it probably would be myself. I think that we as women often struggle with imposter syndrome, and we worry that there were so many people in the room who might be able to do it better or who are much smarter. And I certainly always struggle with that because I know what my strengths are, and I certainly know what my weaknesses are. Um, and when I went back to graduate school to get my master's degree, I had not been a great student in undergrad. And I really struggled. I wanted to go back, but I was afraid I couldn't do it. I thought, well, what if I'm not smart enough? What if I can't do it? And also I had the age thing of, well, I'm going to be blah 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 by the time I finish. And I had a mentor at the time who said, well, I think I said, I'm going to be 40 by the time I finish. And she's like, well, you're going to be 40 either way. So that doesn't matter, so time, so that changed my perspective in general on, as we get educated, as we age, that time really doesn't matter because it's going to pass whether you work on that degree or not. I don't know that I will ever overcome the imposter syndrome, but I think being honest about it, certainly what I do to support myself is I very much work in networks of women and share that and talk about that, and I'm honest about feeling like I'm never the smartest person in the room, and how that feels, and being okay with that, knowing that everybody brings strengths to the table, and that's okay if there are some things that I'm just plain terrible at.
No, I could actually say that I am sort of like that. I'm back in high school. I used to be terrible, but now that I've gained my footing, I feel like I've just kind of learned myself. Dr. Blosser, would you like to tell us some of your challenges and how you've overcome it?
Sure. So, like Caroline, I think that is and I saw Whitney's post to the text. I think that is something that women could talk about every day, of why there's these times in your life when you feel that anxiety about maybe I shouldn't be here, or how did I get to this particular position? It is an unfortunate but very common feeling that women have, and shouldn't in many cases at all have that, but we do. In terms of barriers, I would say, I've been pretty fortunate. There's all kinds of crazy things that happened along my path getting here. I think the biggest barrier was just taking that first step and deciding whether you could do it. And part of it was because I had kids during, a time when I thought, how in the world am I ever going to get my doctorate when I've got little kids, and how are you going to do all that stuff? And, somehow you just manage it. You just do it. There were times when it was not easy. There were times when I went to bed at 3 a.m. and then got up and went to work and probably didn't do my best. But I think, if you just take it in small little chunks and just focus on what you want to get done, that you can pretty much, I've been fortunate when I say I've had support from my family. I think about a lot of women that don't have that to help them. I've been fortunate with that. My husband has had a job that is a little more flexible, so it's allowed me to work and drive 50 minutes because he worked locally. Sometimes if you don't have all those pieces, it is harder to make it all work. So besides the normal things that you have during the course of any career, where there's challenges personally, or there's challenges because of something that's happening at your institution, there's been times when budgets don't look great and you've got to make decisions about that. And those are big challenges that keep you awake. Besides those kind of things, I've really been fairly fortunate. And probably some of it's my personality. I tend to try to think of how we can always make something work and how we can always find an opportunity in what's happening. I think about that in my own life, even when it's not going just perfect. How can I learn from this? What can we find that we can, an opportunity to grow in those. But those are just a few things that come to mind. I don't have a great example, except I do echo what everyone else says about the imposter one. It happens all the time.
Hey, Martha, can I follow up to Dr. Blosser, because mine hits on kind of some of the stuff she did, but in an opposite way, which I think is kind of interesting. I thought about when I was doing my dissertation, someone told me next to whoever you choose to spend your life with, who you put on your dissertation committee will be the most important thing in your career. But one thing we don't talk a lot about with women particularly, and I think is really interesting, it's something I have struggled with. My career trajectory was great at first and it stagnated because of life choices. And I think those are things we often don't talk about. I married someone who has a higher income than me, who's the breadwinner. So the idea that I would move around and make career choices when we have to think about, I had a child much later in life. I said, I chose to take a husband and procreate. Those things can totally change your career trajectory, or choosing not to do those things, or how you balance those, whether you live close to family, what your priorities are in that. And I think we often don't talk about with women particularly, and what just in choosing whoever you choose, men or women, but if you look at typically who's been the higher income is often been, and then if you think about things, when you think about partnering with someone and what that looks like and what life choices you make, those can be huge barriers, or not, depending upon where they are. I think what's interesting about some of the highest level executive leadership we have here at our school, which is very different than a lot, if you look at Jeannie Ann and Kim, local community folks that have risen to the highest levels within an organization, and they haven't relocated halfway across the country to do that, which is not a typical thing you see in higher ed. You see people moving around for careers, so they have been in a great place to grow and develop. But you think about all those things. And we never talk about that when we think about picking careers or picking a partner or having a kid. And I think that is something that we should spend more time talking with women about, and the choices they make and how they balance it out, and what those trade-offs are for you in your life and what matters to you. And it all changes at every season of your life, I think, what value you put on things.
That's great. Mia, if I could join in and talk there too. Similarly, I think about the same things with the decisions I've made throughout my life. I jokingly told my husband that we could not get married until I completed my master's degree, but I finished my master's degree in August and we were married in September. And I will tell you that I am so thankful that I prioritize that for myself personally, because later in life, similarly, my husband was the breadwinner, but he actually had an injury at work, and so he was not able to work. And so I had to re-enter the workforce. I had been raising my children at the time, and I am so thankful that I had that degree and was able to jump back in and move forward. And now the tables have turned, and now I am the one that is the breadwinner for the family. And I just think back at how important it was to think about what my personal goals were and what I wanted to accomplish, and then also find a way to incorporate that for my family and those goals as well. So there are definitely little hiccups along the way that you just never anticipate.
Yeah, I'll follow up on Joanne's last comment there, and to say that the challenges we face sometimes are that we may have envisioned a pathway to leadership and we may have something in mind, but it doesn't always, way does not always open in the way that we are expecting. And you have to be willing to take side steps sometimes to explore opportunities that are more lateral. And in the trajectory of my path to the position here at LFCC, I've had a lot of opportunities to explore different areas of the colleges that I've worked in ways that actually have prepared me and have me, perfectly prepared for the position that I find myself in now. And at the time, I might not have envisioned that. I had an opportunity to do some work in student life, which I had never thought about doing. My most recent experience in online education that I went to I left the community college sector, which wasn't something I had planned to do. I had spent a long career at a community college and didn't envision myself leaving that environment, but an opportunity that did not present itself to me at that college, and made me rethink and reflect. And it was a position that I wasn't selected for, that I felt I was the qualified candidate, and I didn't get it. And that actually spurred me to go get my doctorate. And I started and finished my doctorate, and then I moved on to the new position at another institution. And, when I look back now at all of the experiences that came out of what was a very negative thing at the time for me, I realized, that my path has brought me to a place that I'm, very well suited for. So you have to, I think, we all experience times where we have setbacks, and at the time it may feel like it was a failure, but as you get wiser in years, you realize that often those are the times of greatest opportunity and greatest growth. And it spurred me, as I said, to move in a different direction, and then brought me full circle, because I'm back now doing what I want to be doing at the community college. So you just never know where life's journey is going to take you. So just be open to doing side steps sometimes to end up back where you want to be.
I guess I'll bring up the rear then. When you first posed the question, Martha, I was like, wow, you could take that two ways: challenges to leadership personally or challenges to leadership professionally. And we've heard so many great examples from these incredible colleagues, these people I guess you call colleagues, of the personal challenges. I'm going to take a note from Mia's playbook and maybe share some of the not so easy to talk about things that you face in leadership challenges, particularly as a woman in leadership. And that is making a tough organizational decision. And you sometimes have to let people go and terminate employment with individuals. And that I think sometimes is perceived differently between males and females in leadership. But it is something that if you really value the team that you have been given the sacred privilege to lead, you owe it to that team to make sure that you are being a good steward for them, because what is one of the most, if not the most, demotivating things for your top performers is that you ignore poor performance, or you let poor performance go without calling it out or keeping it in check. And I cannot tell you how much I value the team I'm so fortunate to work with, and to undermine the talent on the team by accepting performance that's not up to par is a pretty big no-no in leadership, especially if you want to keep a very highly motivated team. And it's a quick way to lose respect in leadership as well. But for women, sometimes that's a double-edged sword, because to take the action of actually going through that termination also gives you another reputation. So that's a tough one to balance. And I definitely think, as far as a challenge in leadership, I would put that out there as a kind of a different frontier to think about for the folks out there listening in.
Martha, I know I've already gone, but I do want to echo one thing that Joanne said. We are an educational institution, so all of us believe in education. But I will tell you that that is one of the greatest things you can do for yourself. And I'm always grateful that we've kept that opportunity for our employees to have professional development opportunities to continue their education, because it is something that no one ever can take away from you. And it will open doors that might otherwise be closed if you didn't have it. And so one of my goals was, I can tell you, I will not say that getting a doctorate was the greatest thing, that I enjoyed it. I loved every class. I hated writing that dissertation. I mean, I enjoyed the subject that I did it on, but spending all that time writing was not my favorite thing to do at night. But I never wanted an opportunity that I couldn't apply for if I wanted to be able to do it. And so that was the honest reason that I ended up doing it. But that's what education does for you. It just gives you those options. And then you can decide if you want to pursue them or not. But whenever you can, and if you're any of the employees on here, take advantage of us, take advantage of that money that we put aside to help employees, because it is something that no one can ever take away from you once you have that.
Thank you, and for all the advice and everything that you women have gone through and had to do for your position. The other questions I want to ask is, other than the challenges you have faced on your path to leadership, are there anything you personally struggled with or that you still struggle with as a leader?
I'll go first because I think it hits on Jeannie Ann. Some of us on this conversation have been called direct or something like that. I think I do think oftentimes as a woman, when you are more direct, it is viewed differently. I tend to be too direct, which male or female woman, that is not a good thing either. But I do think women oftentimes struggle with that in ways sometimes, and obviously we're being very generalizationally here, but there are times I think that women are perceived in a different way when they're direct as sometimes others are. I think it comes off a bit harder. There's sometimes some terminology associated with it in a way that I don't think men always suffer through that generalization. And as someone who is just direct by nature, I think that is something I struggle with because my innateness is to be that way. And so I have to really try to keep that in line. And there's some really good people on this thing that have helped me with that and talked to me about that. And that's a good thing. But it is hard to work against your nature sometimes in ways that you have to really be thoughtful about for the better of the organization and you just as an employee and doing your best work that for me, I struggle with, I know, as a woman.
And also too, I have to say, to the opposite side of that, what Mia is talking about is that when people are conflict avoidant, right? So avoiding having those conversations can set up some of the same toxic dynamics. And so, you know, really having to develop insight into how to navigate communication and conflict. It's really fascinating when you think about all of our personality dynamics and really how we all get along throughout the day, because we're all so different and how we feel about certain things. It's fascinating.
I'll
So I
jump in.
can't-
Oh, rock, paper, scissors, Ann.
You can go. I was just gonna say, Kim Scott Radical Candor says, challenge directly, care deeply. So you can.
Well said, well said. And I'm going to steal another quote too. This one's from Andy Stanley. No for now, but not forever. That's one of my favorite quotes in dealing with my challenges, because I want to do it all. I've got fitness goals, I've got career goals, I've got family goals, I've got spiritual goals. I mean, again, that's the ESTJ coming out of me. If you've ever walked in my office, you see just lists of things we're working on and doing and goals and da 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 da. And about 10 years ago, I heard some really great advice about seasons of life. And it's not that you can't have it all, it's just maybe you can't do it all at once. And the quote that just stuck with me from that is, no for now, but not forever. And that gives me the breathing room as someone who wants to achieve a lot and go after a lot, and just really, you know, the day I die, go out knowing that I gave it my all on all fronts, knowing that I've given myself permission to do it, just not all at once, and empowering myself with the language to say no for now, but not forever, has been really empowering.
I'll just say, I think a struggle for women is all the expectations. And I don't mean to say that there's not the same that my husband, but, you know, my kids, you know, if they need to go somewhere, they call me. If they want to do something, they often, you know, your parents sometimes, my mom calls me. I mean, call my brother sometimes, you know, just get him to do something, you know. But sometimes I think, and I don't mean to say that men don't experience this sometimes as well, but I think sometimes women, because you are supposed to be nurturing, I mean, that's the thought, you're supposed to take care of all these things, that it becomes a lot, and you can lose yourself, and you can lose spending time, like, you know, right now, I saw Larry was on here in the Peace Up program. I mean, I want to spend so much time learning and developing my own self that I need to. And so one of the struggles is you have to prioritize that. You have got to do something. And sometimes that might mean, honestly, back before the pandemic, I actually just went to the library for a couple hours so I could just read myself just quietly, where I knew no one would ask me anything, you know. But I think that it can be a struggle if you aren't, like Jeannie Ann, you're not quite as having your schedule and having all your specific things you want to do. You can get lost sometimes. Your own personal self can get lost in those expectations. And so I just think that's one that I have to work on, so I can meet some of my personal goals, like Jeannie Ann was talking about with hers. Because fitness ones are not happening right now. I'm telling you, that's got to get back on board.
If I could follow up on that one real quick. I'm sorry, Amber, did you want to go? Okay. I'm just looking at the screen, and I see so many of us are caregivers on this Zoom, whether it's children or your parents. And this year, I think, has just amplified how much pressure that is for many of us. I jokingly, I was joining a meeting late, and I was joining from my cell phone one day, which is, you know, Zoom on a cell phone is not fun. But I had to do so because my 9-year-old, it was 1:30 in the afternoon, and he hadn't had lunch yet, and I had to make a macaroni and cheese. And I was also trying to lead this meeting. And so, those are just the things that we juggle. And I just need to understand that I am human. And to Jeannie Ann's point, I am not superhuman. I'm not going to do everything great. And I just have to do the best that I can each day. And if I feel like when I go home at night, or I leave my room here now that we're home, and I leave this room, I know that I've done my best. I'm doing the best for what I care about most. And that is not easy. It's sometimes a struggle for me. And it's just something that I just constantly need to think about: what is important to me today, what's important to me 5 years from now, and just keep those two things in my mind, knowing that it's just going to be a constant, I don't even like to call it a balance. It's just a constant juggling and a give and take of all of those things that are important to me and that I am responsible for.
I will just take this on a slightly different direction in thinking about one of the challenges that I think we all face is choosing our battles. And, with all of the, like Jeannie Ann said, all of these competing demands for your time and for your energy, and trying, for me, I'm an ENFJ, so I'm a feeler, and I'm a feeler. It won't surprise any of you who know me, but I think, for me, part of the way that I lead and what's a value to me is really keeping centered on what my mission is as a person and what my mission is in this position. But on top of that, knowing that I can't fight every single battle, I won't be able to win every fight that I go into. So trying to be strategic and determine what I'm going to champion and where I'm going to place my energy in a space where I feel like there are so many things that I should be doing. So I think a part of my ongoing challenge is to not should on myself. So I try really hard to be realistic, but I find sometimes I look at my to-do list and I get those panicky feelings because there's no physical way that one human being could accomplish all of the things on my list in any period of time. So I think that's one of my, and has guiding principles. And I like that. I've been trying to think about what would be my guiding principles. And I'm really working hard on not shoulding on myself, and being careful with myself and with realistic expectations, and finding that balance between stretch goals and what's realistic. And I encourage other people to do the same thing.
Thank you. And for the panelists, I would like to ask, what are some of the characteristics of a good leader, in your opinion?
Don't have expectations of other people that they couldn't have of you. I think leading by example, being willing to jump in, work side by side with people, even when it's not your job, even when it's not your scope. But part of supporting your team is being willing to work shoulder to shoulder with your team when they need you to do that.
I think the first step, it's not the only step, but it's the first step, is really figuring out who you are authentically so that you can be your authentic self. I think often when we're younger and making decisions about how we want to be, we think we're supposed to be a certain way. And I think that we fail ourselves, and we fail to lead when we are a way that is not ourselves. So I think authenticity is really at the foundation of a good leader. There are many other things, but I think that that's a critical piece.
I think respect. I think as a leader and as people I follow, I want to respect them more than I want to like them. Someone once told me that, you want people to respect you. If they respect you, they might eventually like you. And if they like you, they might grow to love you one day. So I think the most important thing is that you're following people that you have a great deal of respect for, because you're not always going to agree with them or see the same things they do. But if you can understand and you value how they came to those decisions, it's really easy to follow, even if you don't align with it. And I think it's the same if you're trying to lead people. They may not always agree with you, but if they know that you came to it and they have good faith and how you got to it for the right reason, it's easy to get on board to follow. So for me, I would say it's respect would be the first.
Thank you for that. And who are some of the leaders that you guys look up to as your role model?
I've probably shared this before, but I have several that I could pick out. But, probably the first one that made such an impression was when I was a new faculty member, and the president at the community college at the time, Jim Perkins, was just the person you wanted to work for. He was the person that just made everything okay, even when things weren't great, when he, talked to the college about what was happening with the budget or whatever. You just felt like everything was going to be okay. He came by and said hello. He was down to earth. You just trusted him. And so I think that was one of my very first experiences with a true servant leader, someone that always put the best interest of the students in the institution before anything. And so all of us that worked for him, and I wouldn't be the only one to say that, there's several others that are presidents now that would say that was one of the best learning experiences. And I will say, you can get the opposite. You can learn from someone that wasn't good as well. And you can learn just as much from someone you don't want to be like. But this was an example of someone that was really a fantastic leader.
Thank you. And what advice do you have for others that have their sights on leadership roles?
I think, to Caroline's point, you first know thyself. Amber mentioned my guiding principles. So I've spent a lot of time as I moved into leadership thinking about who did I want to be as a leader, and what did I want to guide me as a leader. And I think, and I read a lot, so there's a lot of thought leaders. I choose evidence-based authors, not sort of your pop culture leaders, but those that have research backing. And I can share some of those with folks who might want to know who I read and follow. But I think if you know yourself and can begin to shape who you are as a leader, and for me, that's been developing a set of what I call guiding principles, and seeking out mentors. And I don't think that, for me, it's not like one mentor that's guided you, but you need to develop a range of leadership capabilities. And so there may be a person that you seek to learn from who's very good at the financial side of something, or you might seek a leader who's really good at managing personnel relationships, and kind of reach out to those people and understand and build networks with them, so that when you're faced with a situation, you have a network of folks to go to. But one of the most important exercises for me as an emerging leader was I had a mentor who did turn into a very good friend, but mentors don't always have to be your friends, who would put it back on me if I was, went and complained about something that had happened at my institution. She would turn it around and say, okay, let's say you're the leader. How would you have handled that situation? And it almost became like a case study exercise. We would meet for lunch and she would challenge me. And what that did is when I did move into leadership, it was like I had already walked through some of those things. Now, some days I would say, do we really have to have leadership lessons? I just want to complain today. But she really challenged me. And so I began to take that mindset on whenever you're observing a situation to challenge yourself. How would I deal with that situation? How would I handle it? And then an after action report when you are a leader. How did that go? What could I have done better? So I really think a reflective practice, figuring out who you are, who you want to be as a leader, getting as much learning from others, either authors or people around you, and then constantly being willing to have a learning mindset, that you are always in a cycle of continuous improvement in everything that you're doing, and rethinking. We make the decisions we do with the best information we have at that point in time, but then we might get new information and be able to rethink. So I would say those are some guidance I would give emerging leaders.
I think too, to add to the learning piece, is don't do what's most comfortable. I see a lot of LFCC employees on this. So choose to sit on the committees that challenge you because they're not in your area, things that you've never done before. Volunteer, say yes, be willing to do things that are different than you normally do, because they give you such new and fresh perspectives. That's how I've gotten most of my opportunities, is by saying yes to things that other people might have said no to.
Does Ms. Elwood have any advice for any future leaders?
Well, I think those previously shared a lot of great things. The one thing I had in mind was just being around those that challenge you, which has been covered. I think Anne covered that very well. I think also just, I didn't share this, but some things that challenge me also is the confidence piece. In high school, I was a very shy individual, and my path was a little unexpected. And so as I've gotten more comfortable with who I am, and to Caroline's point, understand who I am as a person, I've become more confident. And so just having confidence in yourself, I see many on this open forum that I view as leaders within our organization already. And so just, I guess, be confident in what you, who you are and how you can impact your colleagues and one another and help each and every one of us be our best selves. That's what I would share.
I'll just throw in one last comment. You heard Jeannie Ann say what her personality profile was, and Mia what hers was, and Mia knows that she can be direct at times. I can't tell you how important it is, in my view, to know yourself. So to that point about being authentic, you honestly have to know, or to Anne's guiding principles, you have to know yourself, and you have to be honest about it. People will see very quickly if you are not who you're pretending to be. I would also say that even if you're introverted or extroverted, or that relationships are what matters. And you have to take time to get to know people, to understand what they need. You will have employees who need completely different things from you if you're gonna lead, and you have to understand that. It's the same if you're a dean and you have faculty. Some faculty could care less if you ever come and see them. They actually are more nervous if you come to see them because they think something's wrong. But others, they need you to. They need you to just check on them and see how things are going. But that's, in order to be able to lead and to be able to be effective, you just got to spend that time getting to know people and getting to make sure that people understand you. And I think that goes a long way then in the end. That and the fact that you just have to be honest with people, whether they want to hear it or they don't want to hear it, whether it's you just have to be honest with them. It doesn't work, and things go downhill quickly if you're not. So those are just to add on to what other folks are saying, some of the things that I think can add to that.
Thank you. And I would like to ask the audience if they had any questions for our panelists.
Hi, good afternoon. I think the question I was planning to ask was addressed to some level by different panelists, but I will ask it for the sake of elaboration. Is it fair to say society's perception of women in leadership compared to that of men is different? For example, the level of assertiveness that is acceptable in men and women may be viewed differently. So in your rise to leadership, did you have to overcome such societal biases? Did you have to adjust your leadership style as a result?
I don't mind jumping in to take that one on. And my perspective is a bit different coming from private industry. I see the difference in industry sectors where that's concerned. The first industry sector I worked in was automotive manufacturing. And yeah, I definitely, as in a leadership in a plant, we were in an automotive plant that made the Ford truck doors. I had to fire a lot of people. Just from anything from just excessive absenteeism to the guys on third shift were smoking pot out back. So I definitely there was a nickname for me. And I wonder, again, in that industry, that kind of is more pronounced. That I don't think that would ever happen in higher ed. At least I hope it would never happen in higher ed. And then the other industry sector I worked in was IT. And it was not as pronounced, but when you looked around at who was at the higher levels of the organization, it was primarily males that were at the top of that particular organization. That was a national organization. We had 212 branch offices across the nation. I was corporate HR going to all those branch offices and also seeing the compensation of the folks in the company, and there was definitely disparity between males and females. So I would go out to say it's industry by industry. It looks very different, and I think higher ed does a really good job of balancing that out, and it's a very good culture. But I would not say that that's a universal answer. I think it's very dependent on the industry sector.
I would say, to follow up to Jeannie, I'm not talking about, I guess, perception, but if you look at the people employed at community colleges and leadership, women are still at about 30%. I think it was 28 a couple of years ago. It's 30 or less in presidential executive leadership roles. And when you look at the number of employees that community colleges employ, if you just look at this call, there's way more females than males, but it is still, you still see males way more predominantly in the highest level of executive leadership within community colleges, which is very interesting to me when you look at how the employee breakdown is.
If I could, I'm really grateful to be working at a place that has had a history of strong women leaders from very early on in the institution, and I feel like I've been blessed to not see a lot of the challenges with the gender dynamics that people have in other institutions. But I will share carefully that at one point here at the institution, I was involved in the hiring process for let's just say a leadership position. And during a part of that process was kind of a meet and greet with the level of employee that I was at the time. And we did this with every single candidate, and one of the candidates in this meet and greet with you know, a group of a mixed gendered group of staff people, when asked, like, you know, what would we like to know about him, or we I guess offered him the opportunity to just share openly some things, made a comment about how he hoped some of us could get together, smoke some cigars, play some poker, and watch a ball game. And it was one of those moments where I felt like time froze and everybody looked around and is this really happening? But it was really happening, and it was really happening for, you know, someone in higher ed at an administrative level. So I do think there are these times that we do engage with biases, implicit or otherwise. And I think it's important for us all to engage when we encounter that, to engage with it and call a spade, so to speak. But I do think I have thought often about how I've benefited as a woman and as a woman in leadership in an institution that has valued women in leadership. And I've heard colleagues across the system who haven't always had that experience. And, you know, I have often looked back at that one time and thought, boy, did we dodge a bullet there. And how different this institution would be if we had, you know, leadership that espoused that kind of mentality.
Thank you. And unfortunately, we are out of time, but I would just say thank you to the women of LFCC for their hard work and dedication of us students at LFCC, and just running the whole kind of not corporate, but the whole LFCC just to functioning. And I just appreciate you all and all your advice. And thank you for coming to this Zoom meeting that we had with these great women.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Martha. You did a wonderful job. Thank you to all the wonderful panelists. I mean, I'm inspired. So I'm pretty sure everyone on this Zoom call is inspired. Thank you once again for your time out of your busy day. And we want to just say thank you, everyone who attended. See you all at another time. We do have another panel coming up on March 31st at 3:30. I'll be sending out another email in regards to that one. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Marta, I just wanted to say it's so good to see you. I'm so glad that you were able to be our facilitator today.
No problem. I was nervous, but then I was like, it's fine.
You did a wonderful job, Martha.
You did a great job, Martha. You did a phenomenal job, and you even made the panelists feel comfortable. So great work.
That's good. Like I forget who stated it. It was who was it? I think Miss Caroline stated that to take any opportunities available and just to say yes, and this was just one of them. I was like, might as well get out of my comfort zone and just do what Professor Simpson had taught me, which was just go at it, you know. Practice makes perfect.
I 100% agree.
So proud of you.
Take advantage of every opportunity that's given to you. It's very, very important. There will be times when you have to say no, but as much as you can, definitely say yes. Taj, have you asked Martha about our later event, if she's available for that by chance?
No, I did not. Not yet.
I'm gonna hop off. I haven't seen Marta in a while. I just wanted to say hi and thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
What time are you referring